I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents. It's a highly anticipated special election in a scandal-plagued New York congressional district. We'll speak to one of the candidates in Tuesday's race.
In this special election, we have a chance to send a very loud and clear signal to Washington.
Plus, taking their case to City Hall. Religious and civic leaders pressure Mayor Bloomberg to change his mind about his ban on clergy at the 9/11 ceremony.
The mayor himself, he said that prayer brings strength. And so I'm calling upon him to follow through, to be consistent.
And what does it take to be a faithful citizen? We'll find out.
Respect for human life and dignity, the family, community, care for the poor. That's the way forward.
Well, good evening. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Next Tuesday, September 13th, is primary day here in New York. And it's also a day when people in parts of the city will decide some special elections. And arguably the one gathering the most attention is the race to fill New York's 9th congressional seat. Now that covers parts of Brooklyn and Queens. And you know, it was quite an eventful few weeks back in the spring that led up to this special election. It all started in late May when a link to a racy photograph appeared on the Twitter feed of Congressman Anthony Weiner. The congressman claimed his account had been hacked, but after more graphic images were leaked, he eventually admitted to sending explicit emails and photos to about 6 women. Well, on July 21st, Weiner officially resigned, leaving his congressional seat open. One of 2 candidates hoping to fill that seat is Republican conservative candidate Bob Turner, a retired television executive who originally ran against Weiner in 2010. Turner sat down earlier today with our news director, Ed Wilkinson.
Bob Turner, the congressional candidate in the 9th Congressional District, thanks for being with us today.
Oh, good morning.
I think probably one of the big issues in this campaign, if not the big issue, is economics and job creation. Where do you come down on the side of cutting spending? Should we be cutting spending on a national level, or should we be trying to raise revenue, say, through new taxes?
I think we have a spending problem that is endangering the entire economy. Currently, we're borrowing 40 cents on every dollar that the government spends. This rate of borrowing is just not sustainable, and it endangers the entire economy, our social safety nets. Something has to be done in that area first. Mm-hmm. But there are still things we can do to stimulate business. Mm-hmm. that I'd like to talk about.
Okay. Well, do you foresee cuts in some federal programs? I mean, would you vote for cuts in, say, Social Security or Medicare, things like that? Are we overspending in those areas?
We're not overspending in those areas. Those areas have been built and projected at certain numbers, and people who have paid into the system need to be protected. Mm-hmm. I propose that those 55 and over get the deal they've been promised. Mm-hmm. They're in the system, they made their plans, they've paid their dues. Mm-hmm. So they're protected, 55 and up, Social Security, Medicare. For the younger generation, and generations even earlier, we need to find ways to protect the system and rebuild it. It is not sustainable as it is now. The president knows that. He said it. Any responsible leader in Congress knows that too. So let's prioritize, protect those that are in the system, and then sit down and figure out what do we have to do. I don't think in the future people can retire at 62. I think there'll be a number of painful changes later, but we have to face the problem and we have to do it.
All right, let's talk about job creation then. President Obama has thrown some money into the system, and he seemed to try to create jobs like public works programs and things like that. Still, unemployment is up over 9%. What's going on? What would you favor?
I think the last stimulus has been a total failure. It increased our debt $1 trillion and produced no real jobs. There are trillions available for growth and development on corporate balance sheets. Right now in our energy area, there are a series of things we can do in gas and oil, shale oil, sand oil, offshore drilling. We could become self-sufficient in oil and energy if we started a real program now. This would create 1 million jobs. Let's do it. We don't have to stimulate anything. The money is there, and it's corporate money. Put them to work. Get some of the regulations out of the way. Just do it.
So you're looking to free enterprise then to run the system. You think government is interfered too much in?
Well, we have other problems. I think there are other opportunities. There are $2 trillion on corporate balance sheets in unrepatriated money overseas, in money sitting in corporate accounts now that with the proper incentives might be freed to build plants and equipment, new projects and development. The incentives can be put together by the president and by Congress, and it can be done fairly quickly.
Why hasn't it been done then?
Well, I think we got some ideological problems sticking in the way. We got regulatory problems, and some of the regulatory problems are another major obstacle to job growth and development. The Dodd-Frank bill is going to be particularly heavy-handed here in New York. I think we're going to lose jobs. We're going to lose them to London and Toronto as a result of this bill. The unintended consequences. We have to revisit this and start taking pieces out of this thing before it's too late. We can really hurt the financial sector here in New York, which is the heart of our economy in this city, with this regulations as they're drawn up now.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break here, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about some of the other issues. So we'll be right back.
Okay.
Welcome back. We're here with Bob Turner, the congressional candidate, Republican conservative candidate in the 9th District, which covers areas of Brooklyn and Queens. You're not a career politician, Bob. You're a businessman, a lifelong businessman. Does that hurt you or help you when you're going up against in this race?
I think at this time it's probably a help. My political career, as you may know, began 18 months ago. And I kind of present myself as the citizen candidate. I'm not a careerist. I think people look for some practical solutions to the problems we're facing now. I don't think they trust politicians as much as they might have earlier. So I believe it's a plus.
All right, let's go down through some of the hot button issues that might come up in the campaign. How about in New York, you know, there's been a lot of discussion recently about same-sex marriage. Where do you stand on that?
That is law now. Had I been in the legislature, I would have voted against that bill. I'm a traditionalist and support the Catholic view of marriage.
How about the beginning of life and abortion? Where do you stand on that?
I'm pro-life, and I understand the whole philosophy of pro-life and the need to protect innocent life. As a legislature, that's what I would do.
How about capital punishment and you know, executions?
I believe capital punishment should remain on the books, both as a deterrent to some crimes and in many others as a statement of society for justice.
Being a Catholic, does that, do you ever become conflicted with some of these issues? Say like with capital punishment, the bishops might come down on another side of that, they might be against capital punishment. How do you resolve those issues in your own mind as a Catholic and as somebody in the public arena?
I think many of these issues have been brought forth by Thomas Aquinas and others centuries ago. They've been carefully studied and justified, and I believe the state has the right to impose capital punishment under certain circumstances, and it is lawful, just, and sometimes desirable.
During the campaign, the possibility of building a mosque near Ground Zero came up as an issue in your campaign. What's your position on that?
I've been rather vocal about this since even before my political career. I think this is highly inappropriate. The selection of this site, when others are available and other business deals were available to move that site with people of goodwill, I do not consider this a gesture of ecumenical goodwill. I think it's a thumb in the eye of the victims. I believe that the developers are totally insensitive to the needs of the people, the victims' families, and it is appropriate enough that we should do what we can to move it. I'm not suggesting we suspend the First Amendment. I understand, but enough pressure should be brought on them that they voluntarily move it somewhere else.
How do you think 9/11 has changed our lives as Americans? We're coming up on the 10th anniversary. Certainly life is different today than it was 10 years ago.
Yes, indeed. It was our Pearl Harbor. Whether it is a sufficient wake-up to this country, I don't know. I believe that's the start for us of what I see as the long war. I believe we will be fighting militant Islam for generations, and we have to help support those forces within Islam that are friendly and rational and will help promote democracy and freedom.
Final 30 seconds. Give you a chance to tell us why you think that you're the person who should be elected next Tuesday.
Well, in this special election, we have a chance to send a very loud and clear signal to Washington. If you support the president's policies and the policies of the party, David Weprin's your man. If you think we can take a different and better course, put business practicality to work for the jobs and the economy, I'm your guy.
Bob Turner, thank you very much for being with us today, and good luck with the special election next week.
Well, thank you very much. Pleasure being here.
Well, our news director Ed Wilkinson there with Bob Turner, the Republican candidate looking to win the 9th congressional seat, vacated by former Congressman Anthony Weiner. Now, we should also tell you that our producers did invite the Democratic candidate, David Weprin, on the show, but his office did not return our calls. Well, stay with us. There is much more currents ahead when we return the day's headlines, including a change in venue for some 9/11 services in Washington. Plus, coming up, religious leaders make their voices heard about Mayor Bloomberg's controversial decision.
This will be a stain on his record because people will remember religious intolerance, and that's what this is.
Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure. Coming up later, we'll find out what it takes to be a faithful citizen. But first, let's have a look at today's headlines. Well, more calls today for New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg to reverse the decision to ban clergy from the 10th anniversary memorial service of the 9/11 attacks. Today, opponents of that decision took the fight to the steps of City Hall, and our cameras were there.
We say today that prayer must be included. Prayer is what's gotten families through this tragedy. Many of these families are still grieving.
This is a 9/11 gag rule. This is the grandest act of censorship I have ever seen in my life.
The mayor himself, when he came down to the Iron Cross, being in the museum, he said that prayer brings strength. And so I'm calling upon him to follow through, to be consistent.
This mayor is very defiant. He's used to buying his way. Anytime he wants something, he writes a check, picks up the phone. That's the way he is. He's an autocrat. You're not going to change his mind, but most people regard this guy as a failure in his third term. This will be a stain on his record. Because people will remember religious intolerance, and that's what this is.
This was a tragedy that brought people across the world to their knees. Why are we forgetting God?
And as a Catholic, I am doubly offended that The vast majority of the first responders were, in fact, Catholic. The idea that Timothy Dolan, the Archbishop of New York, is not invited, what's he going to say? How about me too? It looks self-serving. If the Archbishop of New York comes out and says you're denying, with your gag rule, censoring my freedom of speech, that puts him in the position of saying, hey, look at me. No, that's why we have the Catholic League, because I can say things that the guys with the collar can't.
There are alternative prayer services throughout the city in many Catholic churches.
There's no substitute for the real thing. I commend all the religious leaders for having alternative services, but an alternative is exactly that.
It is really troubling that you be willing to exclude the faith communities, which is so central to the lives of many New Yorkers, because you don't want to engage a particular faith community.
I would, as an extension of goodwill to the Muslim community, bring in an imam. If each man spoke for 1 minute, that's a total of 4 minutes. We don't have 4 minutes to spare? I don't believe it. It's a ruse.
Well, meantime, a change in plans in Washington. Most of the 9/11 memorial events originally scheduled to take place at the National Cathedral have been moved to the Kennedy Center. The move comes after a crane fell on 2 cathedral buildings yesterday morning. Other events have been moved to a local synagogue. In a statement, the cathedral's dean says the safety of the visitors and the staff is the top priority. Well, President Obama will speak to the nation tonight on his new plan to create jobs, but the less than stellar unemployment situation has many people praying. Reporter Michael Wooten has more.
They're in need. It's desperate times.
And in these desperate times, folks lined up outside the Statler Towers a half hour before this job fair even started. Once the doors opened, a steady stream of Western New Yorkers filled the lobby to fill out applications.
We need people that have a good work ethic, a good attitude, and want to go to work.
Many want to go to work, and Statler City LLC President Mark Croce is looking for all types of workers.
We're opening a banquet facility, we're opening a nightclub, we're opening a number of restaurant outlets. I mean, you think about the number of different positions that are available, from management to servers to bartenders, barbacks, I mean, across the board.
Croce says he barely advertised this job fair, yet so many people showed up, there weren't even enough chairs for all the folks applying for these 200 jobs. How hard is it nowadays to find a job like this?
Oh man, it's hard.
It's definitely hard to find, especially in the restaurant business.
On the eve of the president's address on jobs, Croce is encouraged by one of the proposals. In addition to infrastructure spending and aid to state and local governments, it's reported the president will include tax breaks to businesses that hire new workers. Is that an incentive to hire people?
Absolutely, because there's a lot of great people out there that happen to be the victim of circumstance right now that may be unemployed or underemployed. And so by giving us a tax incentive, it really motivates us to really, ramp up our plans even quicker.
But some of the unemployed who are losing faith in government are finding it elsewhere.
We'll be praying for those who are unemployed.
Father Bill Quinlivan at Blessed Sacrament Parish changed up his monthly healing service to specifically pray for those looking for work.
It's always good to turn people back to their faith in everything that they're doing. Say, don't forget to include God in it.
The church collected resumes and placed them before a higher power.
We encourage people to keep looking, keep asking God to help them. So that's what we're going to do here at Blessed Sacrament.
Well, that report from Michael Wooten. Back here in New York City, there are more detailed numbers on the city's high abortion rate. The Chiaroscuro Foundation has released new data that breaks down the abortion rate by neighborhood. According to the numbers, the zip code with the highest abortion rate, more than 67%, as a matter of fact, is located in Manhattan's Chelsea and Hell's Kitchen neighborhoods, while the zip code with the lowest rate, more than 6%, is on the Upper East Side. The Chiaroscuro Foundation, which released the data, is a nonprofit that supports alternatives to abortion. Well, meanwhile, in Kansas, 2 doctors there are suing over the state's strict new abortion regulations. Opponents argue that the rules, which include requirements on what drugs and equipment abortion providers must stock, are onerous and would curtail women's access to services. Both sides spoke at a public hearing on Wednesday.
A committee is not necessarily the best way to draw up regulations if it is not composed of experts in their field or seeking consultation from experts in their field.
To allow the abortion industry in the state of Kansas to dictate to the board how it is to operate, how it is to be regulated, is much like the fox guarding the henhouse.
A judge has stopped the rules from taking effect as that lawsuit goes forward. Well, from Philadelphia, a reason to celebrate as Archbishop Charles Chaput was installed today. The installation took place in Philadelphia's Cathedral Basilica of Saints Peter and Paul, with cardinals and bishops from across the country in attendance, including Brooklyn's own Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio. In his homily, Archbishop Chaput said that getting ready for today was like preparing for a wedding. Well, turning now to Pakistan, where Asia Bibi, the Christian woman scheduled to hang for allegedly violating that country's strict blasphemy laws, has written a book. Reports say Bibi wrote the book with a French journalist. Titled Blasphemy, it was published in collaboration with the charity Aid to the Church in Need. The organization calls the book an impressive account of Bibi's story. From Poland, new documents published by WikiLeaks show American embassy officials complaining that the Catholic Church was promoting homophobia in Poland. According to the documents, U.S. embassy officials claim the church played a significant role in the formation and propagation of homophobic attitudes in Poland. In a separate 2005 document released by WikiLeaks, the U.S. Embassy at the Vatican believed that only one day before being elected Pope, then Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger did not have enough support to get elected. And former Christian Dior designer John Galliano has been spared jail time. A French court found Galliano, who claimed in a video that went viral on the internet that he loved Hitler, guilty of public insults based on origin, religious affiliation, race, or ethnicity. Now, Galliano apologized to the court and the plaintiffs, and he said that he did not remember the incident, and he was under the influence of alcohol and drugs at the time. The court gave him a suspended fine of more than $8,000. He will not be required to pay it. Stay with us. There is much more currents ahead. When we return, being a faithful citizen is about more than just casting a ballot.
My sense from talking to people around the country is Catholics are wrestling with how does their faith shape their politics.
Well, finally tonight, what does it take to be a faithful citizen? It's a good question ahead of the upcoming elections. Over the years, the U.S. Bishops' Conference, through its Faithful Citizenship Initiative, has released statements to provide Catholics with guidance ahead of presidential elections. A week before primary day right here in New York, Fordham University hosted a forum to examine the bishops' statements over the years and what it means to be a faithful citizen.
Well, I think they're here because these statements from the bishops every 4 years, although perhaps not widely read among all Catholics, are carefully and intensively read and discussed and even debated among some Catholics.
There are a lot of ways to describe faithful citizenship. Here is what the document said. We are called to bring together our principles and our political choices, our values and our votes to help build a society more respectful of human life, a more just nation, and a more peaceful world.
They've issued statements before the presidential elections every 4 years since 1976. They are trying to spell out some of the major points on which they think Catholics should reflect as they face their political obligations.
So whether we find ourselves more inclined in the Democrat or the Republican direction, I think the Church is right to teach us that we should be acting on our most fundamental values, and that's why we have a document like this. This document represents an assertion by the Church that we want our people, the Catholic people, acting on their most fundamental values.
The whole country's trying to figure out how we get out of this mess, and what tonight was talking about is how does our faith offer us principles and experience that can lead us to a better place. I know I'm being blunt, but we're in trouble as a society, and I believe, more importantly, the bishops believe that the principles, the moral principles, the social principles at the heart of the Catholic faith offer us a way forward. Respect for human life and dignity, the family, community, care for the poor. That's the way forward.
It really is about forming conscience. That is, it's a teaching document. It's not a voter's guide. You know, it's not an assessment of this candidate versus that candidate and so forth. It's a document that's designed in a way to help us inculcate and grow and develop the kind of prudence so that we can be the faithful citizens that it calls us to be.
I feel very strongly that my own well-formed conscience is more important than the bishop's statements, because I have great faith in this conscience. I attended Catholic schools all my life, and sometimes some of the bishop's positions are not really in sync with my well-formed conscience, and I'd rather go with my conscience.
I hope there are a lot of people who look to their own consciences and therefore their faith for guidance in how to choose. It's not easy choosing. Tough times for our country, tough times for our church, but my sense from talking to people around the country is Catholics are wrestling with how does their faith shape their politics.
Well, that is it for this edition of Currents. Now, coming up on tomorrow's show, a look ahead to the 10th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. We'll go into the deep to get Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio's thoughts. We'll have that and much more coming up tomorrow night on Currents. Until then, though, be sure and visit us online over at currentsny.net. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Matt McClure. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night.